Okay, imagine this for a second. What if, what if some of the biggest political moments, the stuff we've all watched unfold recently, weren't just random chaos? What if they were actually like the end result of a really long game? An operation planned out meticulously, going way, way back. We're talking alleged intelligence efforts stretching back to the Cold War. Kind of changes how you look at things, doesn't it? Today, we're diving into a really controversial book. It's Craig Unger's American Kompromat, How the KGB Cultivated Donald Trump. And the core idea, it's huge. Unger basically argues that Donald Trump was groomed, essentially as a Russian asset, over decades, using these things called compromat operations, compromising materials. It's quite the thesis. Now, our goal here isn't just to give you the cliff notes. No, we want to really dig into how Unger makes this extraordinary case. What rhetorical tools is he using, and what makes it stick for some people while others find it, really hard to buy? It's about the persuasion behind the story. And just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM, designed for a deeper, more dynamic analysis of books like this one. So whenever you hear a claim this massive, the first thing you got to ask is, okay, who's saying this? Who is Craig Unger? What gives him the standing to say, and I'm quoting here, something much more sinister and important has been taking place than the public could ever imagine?
Right. Well, Unger definitely brings some credentials to the table. He's an established investigative journalist, and importantly, he's written other books looking into the whole Trump-Russia connection before. So there's a track record there. His credibility, or his ethos, it's built on that extensive journalism background. He explicitly mentions doing exclusive interviews with dozens of high-level sources, people from the CIA, FBI, even the KGB. And he talks about digging through thousands of pages, FBI files, police reports, news articles in multiple languages, English, Russian, Ukrainian. He even names some key sources, which is significant, like Yuri Shvets, who he identifies as a former major in the KGB. That kind of specificity, it's clearly a strategy to build trust, to show he's done the legwork.
Okay, so he's got the background, the sourcing, or at least he lays out this impressive list of sources. But like you said, these claims are just enormous. Doesn't that mean he needs truly extraordinary proof? How does he handle that expectation?
That's the core challenge, isn't it? His main goal is obviously to convince readers of this multi-decade cultivation narrative. And yeah, the variety of sources, the documents, the defectors that can look compelling. But, the nature of intelligence, it often relies on whispers, on anonymous insiders, on people who've defected. So for some readers, that insider view strengthens the case, makes it feel authentic. For others, though, that lack of, maybe on the record, verifiable proof for every single link, that raises red flags. It becomes the question of how much you trust the interpretation, how much you trust the anonymous voices. It really highlights how much a reader's own perspective, their existing beliefs, plays into whether they find this kind of argument persuasive. It's less about just the facts presented and more about the narrative woven around them.
That makes sense. And thinking about the context, the book came out in 2021, right? That timing doesn't feel random at all. It landed right after Trump left office, after years of nonstop headlines about Russia. Seems like Unger knew exactly who he was talking to.
Oh, absolutely. The timing is crucial. He's not dropping this into a vacuum. He's writing for an audience that's already, let's say, deeply familiar with the whole Trump-Russia saga. They've heard the allegations. They've followed the news. His audience is likely people who are politically engaged, people who follow investigative reporting. They're probably looking for a deeper explanation, something that ties it all together. So releasing it then lets him tap into all those existing questions and, frankly, anxieties. He's offering a framework, a very specific and provocative one, for events people were already trying to make sense of. It's smart, rhetorically speaking.
Okay, so if the audience is already primed, maybe feeling anxious or concerned,
Yeah.
how does Unger connect on that emotional level? What words, what kind of storytelling does he use to make you feel the seriousness of it all?
Well, he uses pretty potent language, very evocative. You see phrases like dirty secrets or describing people involved as dissolute, part of a decadent subculture. That's not neutral language, right? It's designed to create a sense of intrigue, maybe even a bit of moral outrage. And then, crucially, he frames the whole thing as a fundamental threat to American democracy and institutions. That's a direct appeal to patriotism, to civic concern. It elevates the stakes beyond just political scandal. Plus, the way he structures the book, revealing information bit by bit, it keeps you asking, okay, How deep does this go? How compromised was he?
Yeah.
It creates this narrative tension. It really shows how tapping into emotions can make the audience more receptive to the logical arguments he's trying to build.
Right, right. Because emotion alone isn't enough for a book like this. It needs that logical structure, that feeling of a case being built. So how does he lay out the argument itself? How does he connect the dots across, decades?
His main tool there is a very clear chronological structure. That's really key when you're arguing something happened over such a long period. He starts way back, like in the 1970s, looking at alleged early contacts, business dealings, and then he moves forward step by step through different eras, different events, connecting them all the way up through the presidency. This timeline lets him suggest a pattern, a cause and effect relationship between seemingly separate incidents. The idea is to make it look less like a series of coincidences and more like a deliberate, patient, long-term intelligence operation. That historical sweep is vital for making the claim seem plausible, grounded. It lets the reader follow this thread he's weaving.
And the language itself, beyond just the emotional words he uses, specific jargon too, right? Like spy terms. Is that part of building the case?
Yeah, exactly. He deliberately uses terms from the intelligence world, like Rezidentura, which is, a Russian intelligence station abroad, and of course, Kompromat.
Hmm.
Using these terms does a couple of things. It positions him as knowledgeable, as someone who understands this world. It adds a layer of authenticity. But importantly, he doesn't just throw them out there. He usually explains them so the general reader isn't lost. But even beyond the jargon, his general word choices often carry heavy connotations, like describing certain environments as corrupt, dissolute, and decadent. It consistently reinforces the negative framing, and even his sentence structure plays a role. You'll see long, complex sentences when he's laying out a chain of evidence suggesting thoroughness, then maybe shorter, punchier sentences for the big conclusions. It all works together to create an impression of authority and depth.
Okay, for more thought-provoking content that inspires reflection and rational thought, you should check out Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis. Definitely worth a look. All right, so we've talked about the arguments, the emotion, the language, but let's be real. A book making claims this big, especially in the political realm, is going to face serious questions, serious challenges. What are the main hurdles Unger runs into here?
Well, the really fascinating thing is this built-in tension, isn't it? Is the gap between standard journalism, which really demands hard, verifiable proof, named sources if possible, and the world of intelligence reporting. Intelligence is often murky. It deals in secrets and suggestions and interpretations based on incomplete pictures. So a major limitation is that parts of the book necessarily venture into, speculative elements, things that rely heavily on connecting circumstantial dots, or on the interpretations offered by sources, some of whom have to remain anonymous for safety or other reasons. And frankly, the sheer scale of the claim, decades of cultivation, that itself demands an incredibly high burden of proof. For readers who are already skeptical, that burden might seem impossible to meet with the kind of evidence available. And then there's the timing again. Because it landed in such a politically charged moment, some people will inevitably dismiss it as just a partisan attack, without even engaging the substance.
So it really puts the onus on you, the listener, the reader, doesn't it? You have to sift through this complex mix, the documented stuff, the testimony from these sources, the connections Unger draws, and decide how much weight to give each piece.
Absolutely. It forces you to confront a really critical question, especially when you're dealing with anything involving intelligence. How do you tell the difference between a claim that's well supported, even if the proof is a bit unconventional, and one that's more speculative, more interpretive? Unger clearly knows his audience. He tries to anticipate their need for evidence and structure. But ultimately, whether you find his argument convincing, it probably depends a lot on what you already thought about the Trump-Russia issue, and, maybe more importantly, how comfortable you are with conclusions drawn from intelligence-style analysis, which often lacks that smoking gun proof. It asks you to be a very active reader.
So to kind of wrap things up, we've looked at how Craig Unger builds his case in American Kompromat. We talked about how he establishes his credibility, how he uses language to connect emotionally, and how he lays out that chronological, logical argument trying to link events over decades. His clear goal is to convince you that the patterns he highlights point towards this long-term Russian cultivation effort. It's a fascinating look at how you construct such a high-stakes narrative, whether you ultimately accept the conclusion or not.
Yeah, and looking at the big picture, Unger's approach is definitely coherent. He pulls together a lot of different threads, Source interviews, documents, historical context, emotional appeals to things like democratic values. It's a complex tapestry. And the fact that people still debate the strength of his evidence, the persuasiveness of his specific arguments, that just shows why this remains such a relevant and honestly intellectually demanding subject. It really pushes you to think about how these narratives get built and how we evaluate them.
So, as you think about what we've discussed today, maybe reflect on how information, especially controversial information, is presented to you generally. In the news, in books, online, how do you decide what counts as extraordinary evidence when someone makes an extraordinary claim? That's a crucial skill in today's world. Don't forget to check out Mindful Moments and our other podcasts for more deep dives like this one. If you want an in-depth summary of American Kompromat, just click the link you see on screen. Please subscribe, share if you found this valuable, and always, always remember to think rationally.